Oh, thank you. So this is a fireside chat about making the leap and taking the lead. Instead of a fireplace, we have the entire internet between Paul and me. But we're still going to talk to you about this lifeline of technology that we've had this last year. You know, you can see that like some of us has carried on remotely. CogX has done a brilliant job making this hybrid. And I think you're in for a great session. I did want to mention, because we're here together, that the Turing and Accenture have worked together since 2017. And what we've worked on is joint research that's peer-reviewed. Like, I can't see him. That's peer-reviewed and open. And one of the first projects we did together was anti-money laundering research, anti-money laundering algorithms. And I don't have one of those mugs. Paul got one of those mugs because he's much more important. And when we did this research, we knew that Accenture actually already had a platform and technology in place for doing these all-important AML checks for financial institutions. And that was really important. They had the client base, they had the product, they had the technology. And actually, they also had a lot of false positives and a lot of false negatives. It was a good model, a good algorithm, but we at the Turing thought it could be better. And as you know, as business people and as customers out there, a false positive means you as an individual get treated like a potential criminal. And a false negative, well, none of you really know what that means because I'm hoping you're not laundering money. But it means that actually that the bad guys are getting away. And so we thought that actually that the work we had with researchers who were experts in network theory could be really useful in this area and hadn't been applied in exactly this way before. And so Accenture very kindly let us tinker in their work and release the results of that more generally. And we think that's better, right? Financial institutions need to catch money launderers, customers need to be treated well, and you just want the right answer. So that's the kind of thing that we like to work on, and we're really glad we've done that with Accenture, and that's why I wanted to mention it. Last year, we started a 5-year strategic partnership with them. And so we expect to be doing more and more projects like that, where there's a big goal of making things better, along with the Turing's ability to sort of, you know, work at the cutting edge, and Accenture's ability to make it happen in the real world is a really nice grouping. But enough about all of that. This is about some work that Paul's been doing in the last year. So there's so much to say about Paul's career that I'm going to pick a few things. So Accenture's Group Chief Executive, Accenture Technology and CTO. He co-authored the book Human and Machine, Reimagining Work in the Age of AI, which is about the AI paradigm shift in business processes. So you should online and in person ask him questions about this because that was based on a lot of organizations. He's been recognized in so many leading publications, Computer World, Retail Week, Ad Week, and so on, name them. So please welcome Paul. I'm finally going to let you speak.
It's great to be here, Christine. I'm really looking forward to this. And I have to tell you, I do a lot of events like this, but it's one of the first where, as we opened, I heard live applause from inside the room. So I really commend CogX for putting together the physical and the virtual here as we explore, you know, this new hybrid world we're moving into, and it's great to be here. And the collaboration, as you said, with Turing Institute is just fantastic. I was so excited when we were able to launch that a few years ago and do the AML work and other work that we did. And I think the fit between our organizations and complementary capabilities is really exciting. So great to talk to you today.
Good. Well, thank you. Yeah, hopefully there'll be more sounds of applause as we go through, Paul. So I think a great place for us to start today is to tell us all what some of the key takeaways are for you from the last year.
Yeah, you know, the way to start is by saying, you know, that we've been through an incredible year. You know, to go to the song from Rent, it's 525,600 minutes. You know, how do you measure a year? Is one of the songs from Rent. But it's a little over a year since the onset of COVID. You know, about 15 months. And it really is spectacular what's happened, spectacular in a bad way, but also spectacular in terms of what we've learned from it. And I would say and I'm probably not the only one to say this, but it's compressed 10 years of change into a year or two in a number of different dimensions. And a lot of people have said that, but I'm going to try to bring that to life, Christine, through the discussion that we have today, because I think the nature of the impact that this has on us as individuals and organizations is really profound. It's just starting to be felt. I mean, think about what we went through over the past year. it was kind of quaint back in, end of 2019, early 2020. We were talking about Brexit and big concerns about Brexit, which came to pass, and that seemed like a big deal. It was a big deal at the time. Then we had, in the past year, we had geopolitical tensions: China, Iran, North Korea, Russia. That they're still continuing with, even today, news about that. And we had systemic, concerns about systemic social injustice and racism in the U.S. in particular, and in other countries as well. We just had the 1-year anniversary of the George Floyd murder from last year as a sign of that. We had unprecedented political division, not just in many countries around the world, but manifest in the U.S. in particular with what was happening. And we had this thing called COVID. So there's so many factors, and COVID really was the big event that created, I think, a demarcation, the way we need to think about what we were doing versus what we need to do going forward. Excuse me. And that's the subject of the research that we did, that I'll get into as we talk further. And what I think the key learnings are that the world is a place of incredible volatility. We talk about the VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, et cetera. That is certainly true. But I think what we've learned over the past year is that you need to, as leaders, what do you do about it, and how do you operate in this world? And a lot of our research focused on how do leaders lead differently in this volatile world that we're living in. And I think we also learned a lot about resilience and the resilience of people. It's amazing what people accomplished in the past year on so many different dimensions, and I'll talk about that a little bit as well. And you used the words earlier, Christine, as well. Technology was a lifeline, for a lot of organizations. I think we learned a lot about technology and the very different role that I believe it'll play going forward. So those are some of the overall learnings.
And so specifically from these companies, the sort of managing the unmanageable, is a lot of the things that, organizations have experienced. And you spoke to so many companies. What are some of the lessons that they imparted?
Yeah, we just as background, the research is called Make the Leap, Take the Lead. Sounds like something gnomes might do or something, but that's, for better or worse, the title we gave the research. And it's about how to lead in this environment. And we did interview thousands of companies. We believe it may be the largest survey ever of enterprise company executives, large company executives on what they were facing. And the interesting thing is that we did this research before COVID, and then we did it after COVID. So it's kind of a BC and AC, before COVID and after COVID dimension to it. Before COVID, we reduced a set of research in January 2020, and it was research. The research was looking at the progress that companies were making on the way to be digital. And it highlighted an interesting finding that the top 10% of companies were outperforming others by a factor of 2x. The top 10% of digital leaders were outperforming the rest by a factor of 2 times in terms of revenue growth and other factors. Stark difference. And it was enabled by, when you dug into the survey data, it was enabled by their system strength, fundamentally how they were leveraging technology in different ways. It was enabled by, talent capability they had, and it was enabled by governance in the way that they were driving the transformation that they had around digital. So that was kind of the first chapter, like the BC chapter before COVID. And then COVID happened, and I look at it as that was the test. You had the first chapter, and then every organization had to take the test. COVID put you through a test, and you succeeded or failed. And I think most organizations did far worse on that test than they expected to. And they realized that, while they kept things going and technology was the lifeline, they didn't have the capabilities in place that they needed to survive and thrive in a more digital world. And then that's why we redid the research just in the last few months, and we produced the report. We went back to the companies and asked a lot of the same questions. And it turns out that over this period of time, those top 10% increased their lead. The gap widened from 2x to 5x. So think about that. The leaders extended their advantage. So not only was technology the lifeline, those that were better at technology were able to advance, their lead in the markets and advance their business. Those that weren't were stuck in motion. And that's now created the AC, the after COVID, post-COVID chapter, which is every, virtually, or, every company, every CEO that I talk to, every C-suite executive is focused on how do they now accelerate and compensate for the gap and the deficit that they had in their capability and move forward into this new world. One other interesting thing that we encountered through this is not only did the top 10% increase their lead, we also saw that there was a category we called the leapfroggers, which is where the name of the report came from. And that was another 20% of organizations that were able to capitalize in the new environment in a variety of ways. And they were able to outperform by 4x in this new environment. The leapfroggers didn't start out as leaders, but they used, a different outlook and a different, different set of actions to put themselves in a different place. They re-platformed faster. They moved to the cloud faster and accelerated their cloud journey. They shifted their budget from operations to innovation very rapidly, developed new, whether it be e-commerce or home delivery, whatever the innovative new capabilities they needed were. And they kind of had a different way of spreading this capability throughout the organization. So that's the overall perspective, Christine, that we developed through the research.
And so more on these leapfroggers then, Paul. So so that was the case, before and after. There was a subset that were leapfrogging. So, if there are CEOs of companies or organizations here, like, what can they learn from them? What can they actually action rather than saying, this last year I wasn't a leapfrogger? What can you give them to do?
Well, I think there's a few things that you need to do. I think part of it was some of the things I just mentioned. We found that the cloud isn't the answer to everything, but technology was the lifeline. We're all moving into a digital world. We said, we wrote a report in 2013 that said every business is a digital business, and that's become true. And if everybody's trying to be digital, technology really becomes the enabler. And every company needs to be as good at the digital natives and digital platform companies as technology. That's the reality of the world we live in. And I think companies are on that journey. So that's one of the actions: getting to the cloud faster, building the technology capability, et cetera. But I'd actually back up and say that there's 4 key new realities that you need to think about as you move into this new world, and that's what really makes this acceleration of change from 10 years into 1 or 2 years real. So there's 4 new realities. I'll just go through them quickly that you need to incorporate as you think about your business and your team, and think about your life going forward, for that matter, as well. The first new reality is the new reality of human experience, and this is one that I don't think most are really taking into account yet. If you think about what we learned over the past year, is what happened is billions of people changed their behavior instantaneously because of COVID. Never before happened in the history of human civilization. We've had industrial ages and agricultural ages and prior flus and wars and things. The change was always very prolonged. Instantaneously, billions of people changed their behavior in similar ways, and changed it in profound ways. So primary care telehealth visits up, several hundred times. Online grocery shopping up, doubled in the U.S. in a matter of weeks, from 40% to 80%. We're all, hanging out. In this case, I'm going to hang out right now. We're WebExing or Teamsing or using whatever platforms that use Zooming. Not just at work. It's your kids, and the way that they're learning. It's your relatives, your friends, families are interacting differently. The change that in the human experience is dramatic and profound, and customers, consumers, citizens want different things today than they did before COVID, and they're going to want different things over the next 6 months, a year, and a couple of years, because we're still understanding the long-term implications of the change in human experience. And I think this means that every company needs to have a sensing capability to understand this change of human experience. You need to have a technology capability to allow you to change and capitalize on what you need to do to meet that human experience with your consumers, customers, employees, et cetera. And it needs to be integral part of your business strategy. I don't think enough companies are focusing on that yet. So human experience, I think, is really a big deal and something that you need to focus on. The second thing is technology. The second new reality is the new reality of technology. And I would say there's 2 truths that we learned about technology, or that you need to recognize. The one is that exponential technology change is accelerating. COVID didn't impact it a single bit. And so against this backdrop of volatility, you have technology change accelerating, and you have the fact that I talked about earlier, that every business is becoming a technology business. So you add those 2 up, and it has profound implications for businesses, as every business really becomes a technology business. This is what I talk to CEOs, and not just CIOs and CTOs about, but CEOs about technology and specific technology choices they make. And that recognition of the role of technology as being essential in your business is really critical. We'll probably come back to that a little bit. And technology not only is the lifeline, but it's the differentiator going forward. The third new reality then, so there's human experience, there's this role of technology is much different now than it was. The third new reality is work itself. And people, we're not going back to the way it was. Everybody talks about hybrid work. We're talking about this omni connection that you need to form between people and the way they work, which is very different. It's not hybrid. I think is a little bit too simplistic. So we talk about omni connection, and we're designing work in our organization to be independent of location, independent of time, metadata and data driven, and highly automated. We've hired and onboarded 100,000 people at Accenture since the start of COVID. All recruited, hired, onboarded virtually, now working virtually. So we've learned a lot about how to do this, and it's a very different, way of working going forward. And the fourth new reality is sustainability, which might be a little bit of a surprise to throw sustainability in on top of these things, but you can't ignore it. We're at 417 parts per million, in terms of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Last time it was at these levels was 4 million years ago, and companies are at this point of realizing the impact that has in their strategy going forward. So the reason this is connected to what companies are doing now is that this is the moment when you need to connect the sustainability initiatives into how you design these platforms and design your business going forward, which is why we're seeing companies taking the actions that they're taking. So I think these four new realities are different ways of thinking about things that companies need to incorporate as they shape their strategy in this after COVID environment.
Thanks for that. And so coming back to the third one, the way we work, this research in the last year really focused on the sort of before and after of COVID, but I know you've thought about and wrote about extensively human and machine as well. So do you want to bring those three things together for me, right? Human, machine, omnipresence. How do you think about that?
Yeah, if you need to think about the workforce and work in three ways. There's the human element, there's the digital or in machine element, and there's the physical element. And you need to think about all three of those distinctly and look at how do you augment and really focus on the human more and what the humans need. Things like everything from how they're productive, how they're learning, thinking about mental health and other issues that have been exacerbated during the crisis. And there's a big human dimension and element. The digital and machine part, like I wrote extensively about this in the Human Plus Machine, is how do you create that pairing of human and machine? Our belief is that every person, no matter what you do, will have you kind of have your own digital twin, your own digital agent guiding the work you do within a few years. So how do you create that highly productive, highly automated and augmented human plus machine capability? And then the third is the physical. Like there's many jobs that are physical, and that you need to think about. There was an interesting tweet the other day about this concept that actually the physical work will actually have higher staying power than the digital work going forward because of the human interaction that you need to drive it. So those are the elements we think about. In the book, we wrote about this idea of the missing middle, which are these new jobs that are created as human capability and artificial intelligence and technology come together. And we've seen just even more evidence during what's happened in COVID that is the future of this tighter connection between humans and the technology capability.
Yeah. It's so interesting about the sort of human element, right? Because, in lockdowns in various countries, having people being not allowed to go places has shown exactly where we're vulnerable and where the human element is so scarce, isn't it? Right? You sort of, it makes it evident right away what can and can't happen without the human element. So hopefully, as you say, that sort of work gets honored. And becomes
and I think and that's why we need to really focus on this human experience element more, and why I think it's strategic for companies. You can't overlook it. Is that it's important for employees. Things like it's really not healthy to sit on Zoom calls or whatever for 8 hours a day. The brain wasn't designed for it. The neuroscience and the capability we have can't handle that degree of intense video concentration interaction. So we need to. That's part of how we need to redesign work the way we think, but also how do we redesign the consumer experiences in the same way to meet them where they are as their experience changes. So those are the kinds of things we're focusing on.
Yeah. And so I know it's your business at Accenture to identify tech trends and sort of point to the future and tell your clients where to sort of stay up to date. Can you help them chart their future a little bit?
Yeah, and we've got a lot more. I can send this around to people if you want to get in touch with me if you're interested, or Cogex can send it out. But we've got a lot of this out there online that you can look at. But every year we do, in addition to this Make the Leap research, which is also out there online, we do a kind kind of a forecast of the technology trends that matter. This was a particularly interesting year to do it because it's the coming out of COVID year with what's happening in technology. And so I'll talk through 5 trends really quickly that we put together that we believe lead organizations into the future. And I think it's against this backdrop that it's been, from a technology perspective, it's definitely kind of a V-shaped, rapid kind of acceleration coming out of COVID. Companies are investing dramatically. The economists talked about 120 CapEx investment being at 120% pre-COVID levels. A lot of that going into technology and software, intellectual property, and the analysts that track the technology industry are projecting unprecedented increases in corporate investment in technology that we've never, levels we haven't seen before. And against that backdrop, that's why these trends are so important. So there's 5 trends, and we put this together under a title that we call Leaders Wanted, mastering change at a moment of truth, because we think the technology going forward is about a change agent, how you put platforms of change in place versus static technology platforms. And the 5 trends really quickly are stack strategically, which is about making the point that the technology stack matters. You can't just choose anything. You can't put together a messy architecture. How you architect your technology is critical to your business, because every business is becoming a technology business. And that's why I'm spending a lot of time, again, not with CIOs and such, but with CEOs on the technology choices they're making, which clouds and hyperscalers they're partnering with, et cetera, because it makes the difference to their business. So it's about how do you get to cloud and then move to the edge? How do you capitalize on data and AI? How do you do all that in a secure manner? How do you create these experience layers in organizations? And I kind of look at what happened with Moderna as an example of this. Why did Moderna and BioNTech, both of them, how were they able to come up with vaccines so quickly? It was a lot of reasons, but one of them was the fact the way that they use technology. And in Moderna's case, as they've widely talked about, they had a drug design studio powered by Amazon in their case, convolutional neural networks and artificial intelligence algorithms powered by data, so that their scientists could work in an unprecedented fashion at an unprecedented speed to come up with this a vaccine based on messenger RNA. And that's an example of stacking strategically. Starbucks would be another example. How did they thrive and switch to remote ordering and create new consumer experiences around home delivery by partnering with Uber Eats and others? It was by microservices and APIs and their cloud architecture and their mobile app that they were able to put together. And that's what we mean by stack strategically. The second trend is called mirrored world. And this is talking about digital twins, which we've been talking about in our trends for many years. But we're at a point where the digital twins and the technology of creating them is at a point where you can scale dramatically in organizations. We see digital twins in health, such as companies like Philips doing digital twins in the retail industry, digital twins in sports, the National Football League in the US, digital twins of athlete performance and team performance, digital twins in shipping. Yeah. So the point is these are moving from simulation to operations and allowing companies to operate their businesses using computerized digital simulations of the real world. And that idea of the mirrored world, massively powerful, intelligent, connected digital twins is how we'll run our businesses going forward. It'll be a big shift in the business processes, and they'll operate in a human plus machine way, as we talked about, Christine, in the book. The third trend is we call iTechnologist, which is the democratization of technology. And this is low code, no code tools, citizen, developer and things like that. And, the role of IT will be to enable and empower all employees, not just the technology employees, to be, technology literate, but also to have the capability that you need in the organization. The fourth trend we call anywhere, everywhere, which is how do you enable this new omni-connection environment? And it'll be, the new ways you can create these experiences, plus also the way you bring in things like, virtual reality. One way we're onboarding, the 100,000 employees, the people at the rapid pace I was talking about earlier, is we're experimenting with new things like virtual reality to create these new workplaces and new environments for people. We're experimenting with augmented reality and mixed reality to help physical workers do things like plant inspections from your remote locations, from their homes. And that's what we mean by this anywhere, everywhere idea of work. And then the final one is around multi-party systems, and talking about how multi-party systems, which is the broader categorization of distributed ledger and blockchain, and this would incorporate cryptocurrency, central bank denominated currencies, non-fungible tokens, and also just all the different mechanisms and ways you can automate processes using distributed ledgers. We believe the time is now. And if you look at the degree of change we need to make in a lot of cases, multi-party systems are going to really transform the landscape in a lot of ways going forward. So those are the 5 trends that we highlighted for this year, Christine.
I appreciate you mentioning the sort of low code, no code movement, and as a trend in general. We work really hard to make sure that the community researchers at the Turings are very big and broad, and a big tent that includes many. And I would say it would be a big overcorrection here or elsewhere if everybody was coding. Right? We need expertise in all sorts of different domains. And we've just seen this over and over again, that building teams with, yes, computer scientists make AI, but they're not the only ones, right? The sort of the data stewards, the domain experts, in this last year, the clinicians, right? So on and so forth. There's a lot that goes into what we would consider AI these days.
Yeah, that's why we're spending so much time with so many companies on talent and culture around technology and innovation. We have a program at Accenture we call TQ, technology quotients, like your IQ. Your IQ is important, your EQ is important, but we believe the TQ of every person is important, regardless of your role at Accenture. And so we have a program called TQ for everyone, and we're to educate them on the basics of what every person should know about technology. And we're working with a number of clients on those types of programs to equip them, as you just said. Whether you're a data steward or whatever you might be, the role of technology in your job is really important. Again, in this human plus machine future, everybody needs to increase the technology quotient they have and their fluency in using technology.
Yeah, and I can't remember who said it, but you don't go to a Michelin star restaurant and then complain that the chef hasn't built the oven himself, right? You're just tremendously pleased with the creativity and the nice outcomes. And I think obviously the chef in the back, she's familiar with the heat and the dials and exactly how to get that machine working for her, but he or she doesn't worry too much about the rest of it. Right. And so I hope that that's where we're heading with AI as well. But people online, you should feel free to ask questions and also dispute the analogies, right? Because that's a big thing about this. We make these narratives, we make these analogies, and you might nod and agree, but there might be a different way of thinking about it as well. I'm going to get to ask a couple more questions, but that means for those of you in the room, start thinking about what you might like to ask Paul. And I've already told the people online that they should do that as well. So this moment of truth, Paul, it's this moment of truth, right? The organizations, companies as well, look at themselves and say, who are we going to be next? And so how can we sort of capitalize on this moment of truth in the coming years?
Yeah, I think the other thing we played with in the title, so it's a moment of truth, but it's also a moment of trust, and I think that's one thing that you need to capitalize on. So one thing is it is a moment of truth, and I think the way that many companies need to look at it is you're creating the platforms for the next generation of your business. Companies are investing massively in their digital platforms. They're investing massively in the cloud, and you're creating the next generation of your businesses, which is why it's a moment of truth. Just like the initial ERP platforms or whatever that you put in 20, 30 years ago, those are, upgraded versions of those are running most of your businesses. We're creating the technology foundation for the next couple of decades for the businesses that we all are stewards for today. And that's why it's a moment of truth to get it right, because of the degree of change and investment that we're building in. But when you think about these broader changes, it's a moment of trust as well. It's a moment of trust with your employees and your workforce in terms of, are you meeting them where you need to, in terms of equipping them with the ability to learn, working with them in the addressing the challenges of working in this new workplace, et cetera. And we're in an incredibly tight talent market, an incredibly hot talent market for the next, that's just not right now, but for the next several years in most parts of the world. Any of you trying to hire technology employees realize this, and your ability to hire the right employees to work on these, work on technology and in many other areas is going to depend on your ability to create that level of trust with your employees. And again, we talked a lot about this in Accenture and in Human Plus Machine, is your ability to help your own employees, learn and evolve into the new jobs of the future is what's critical. It's not, displacing these employees and finding new ones. It's helping your employees move. And that's one element of trust. The other element of trust is with respect to your consumers and the world outside your company. Artificial intelligence is a big differentiator for companies going forward. Like the work Christine is talking about that we're doing with the Turing Institute. The data is a big issue. The ability, access to data, opt-in rights for data. A lot of the controversies around, the digital platforms' access to data are real issues. It's an issue for every company, not just the big platforms. And that's why your ability to create trust with the consumers, that they trust your handling of the data, is going to be critical, because you're going to be able to do more things to provide more valuable experiences and services to that consumer if they trust you. So we really do believe that it's a moment of truth to think about everything you do and the way you're doing it, and are you doing it in a way that's enhancing the trust, with your stakeholders, being your employees, consumers, communities, et cetera, or are you operating on the boundaries of the trust? And those that operate on the boundary of trust and don't really have that trust, I think are going to be at a severe disadvantage going forward.
And what about as for companies, for countries and governments? What do you think? Do you think the themes are similar in thinking about nation states?
I think they are. I think I'm a big believer in we need an open. The future is brighter and better with an open view among how we collaborate, advance the state of technology, and advance how we apply technology to solve societal problems. So I think kind of an open approach, is an open approach and collaborative approach, and more standard technology platforms, I think, are the right path to the future. Now, the issue we have is that there's different, national interest and things at stake, and different values in different spots that are leading to a lot of tension in that system. But I think we need to kind of strive for a bar of collaboration and openness on these dimensions, because that's what's going to create the best future for the societies and communities that we operate in. I think what every country needs to do is look at their own. You need to look at their own national interest. Do countries have the right R&D agenda? Are you investing in the right technologies that your workforce and your companies are going to be viable going forward? And I think there's a lot of room for companies to do more on that front. Do you have the right? We're at a point where workers are going to be displaced and need to learn new skills. Do you have the right investments in place in the workforce, reskilling and retraining, and transforming the educational system for these new needs? So there's a lot of different issues that I think are in the zone of the countries and communities to work on, but they're all related around the same types of fundamental drivers.
Well, I've got a couple of questions here online. So let me ask one. Do I give names? I don't know. No, I don't know. Good question all the same. How can companies navigate and plan for the true demand of online services post-COVID?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think that's the point. That's the point of this new human experience I was talking about. There's a kind of permanent shift to more online, more e-commerce, more dynamically created experiences. So I think what companies need to do is invest in that set of capability. You can see it. Just a simple example: Chewy, which is dog food delivery company that I use to get food for my dog. They online ordering and delivery platform, and well positioned for the future. Their orders in utilization spiked during COVID. So I think every company needs to think about that. And the good news is many companies who had the basics of the online capability in place were able to scale rapidly during COVID. A number of retailers had the basics of their online capability in place and were able to scale. And I think every company needs to think about that. And I think it's about your technology foundation. Do you have the right technology foundation that can do that? And then I guess another good example I'll cite is Pandora, the jeweler, who put in place a cloud-based platform to enhance and accelerate their new product development process, and accelerate their e-commerce initiatives, and kind of very successfully position themselves by doing that. So it's those kind of initiatives that companies need to look at, combined with really the right understanding of the consumer and the consumer experiences that you're trying to create.
Thank you. I saw one person in the room. I'm also going to scan a little bit. Anyone else making their intentions? Great. So in the brown shirt, please. That's you. Sorry, green. One in particular, sort of pre-COVID and after COVID, we're expecting to see incidents of mental illness on the rise in the workforce as well as the general population. So sort of preparing for that. And then the second question was sort of even before all of this, there was a lot of burnout anyway. And so with the technology flourishing even more, there's problems, but and also just a sort of shift to online is that actually a preference, or was that just a necessity? So sort of big themes around that. Yeah.
I think on the first question, I think it's an incredibly important topic, looking out for the mental health and well-being of employees. We had Mental Health Awareness Month, I think that was last month. and a lot of have a lot of initiatives and focus on this. I think one of the big things we did is we formed a partnership with Thrive, great organization that are in the Huffington Forum, to help educate all of our leaders and all of our people on how to best handle this new different workplace, the stresses of it, the mental health issues around it. We have had a campaign around different support activities and provided a lot of additional support for our employees, and also campaigns like "It's okay to say you're not okay," just to remove the stigma about that people have had about not talking about issues when they have them, and more. But I think it's a good question. It's an important topic, and I think all of our organizations need to really focus on this and think about the human element, because it continues to be a more stressful time because of everything that's going on. And it was the stresses, not just the COVID environment, it was the stresses in certainly in the US, at least around the social issues, political issues and such, and all that come together into just new forms of stress, and creating outlets for people to talk about that and connect has been extremely important. So and there's also things that technology can do to help with that. There's new capabilities that we're building into some of our online platforms to build in the right reminders and encourage people to do things that are gonna improve, give them the breaks and improve their ability to work effectively. On the second issue about online, I do believe that that'll be sustained. I think some things will go back. We'll go back quickly to to physical and such. People are going back to restaurants. Everybody's not going to continue to order out and take out. But I think there's a new plateau and a new bar set for online experience that I think will continue, because it's people have seen the convenience and the ease of doing it, and for companies there's advantages to doing it. In many cases there's sustainability and other benefits from doing it in different ways. So I think we'll see a continued kind of new bar set and a rising bar around doing more online.
And one question from the man in red. Paul, the question's about the human experience and the need to create a sensing capability. And the question is about the combination of the human and technology technology and leadership to create the this new sensing capability. This is harder than it looks, people.
Yeah, I think we're going to keep learning about this for the next several years. I don't think it's an easy thing, because I think as humans we're still adjusting to these experiences and still figuring out what we want to do. So how will people want to work? So we are using a lot of technology to do it. We're surveyed and we're talking to all of our employees. What do they want to do? How will they want to work? We've done a very large survey of the potential workforce of people that we might hire to understand what they're going to need, and the answers come back as there's a lot of different answers, and which leads us to this omni-connection view of we need to be very flexible, and some may want to be more remote. I want to work from home and only come in when I need, on rare occasions when I need to or whatever. Others want to be in the office and can't wait to get back with colleagues. And I think the future is going to be about leaders having the tools to understand and shape the work in the right way as you have the ability to within your organizations. So I think there is a lot we can do around using technology to better understand that. And I think we need to do it on an ongoing basis, because the answer today will be different than the answer in a year from now, because the environment and our own expectations continue to change.
Paul, I think you've given everyone a lot to consider, but I'm going to give you one final word of wisdom for the crowd.
It's hard to. So what's the one word of wisdom? I think the biggest thing I think about going forward is learning. I think all of us, and that's why I assume that's why you're all investing time in attending COGEX, which is fantastic. I think we're in an environment where we need to learn very rapidly and adapt our businesses accordingly. So learning is kind of where I put it at. We need to help people in our organizations learn faster and learn more. We need to help colleagues. If you're in technology, you need to help colleagues outside technology, whatever. We need to help people learn and understand what's happening more effectively. And we, on a personal basis, need to learn and advance our point of view. So my final word of wisdom is I kind of think about it as my learning architecture. How am I going to learn, and who do I learn from? What modes do I learn in? And I think every day about how do I kind of augment that capability to make sure I'm learning what I need to, so that I can share that with with my leadership, with my organization, and incorporate the changes that we need to in our business. That's probably where I'd wrap it up. And I think kind of learning in that very human-centric way going forward, I think is going to be critical for us.
Well, thank you so much from afar and from near. Thank you very much, Paul. And could we give him that feeling of?
There you go. The applause sound, real applause sounds great. So thank you. And that's great to again. Thanks to all of you for attending. Thanks, Christine, for the great interview. And I think it's fantastic that CogX put on this great virtual plus digital event, or virtual plus physical event. So thank you all.
Thank you.